I'm Kenna, and I lead the CAD team, BIM team at Glan Agua. Glan Agua are a contractor in the water and wastewater industry. I'm just going to go through an overview of the company, some of the major projects that we've completed, and I'm going to pass over to Jonathan, who's going to speak a little bit about BIM within the company. So basically, we're in the water and wastewater industry. Some of the sludge management is a byproduct of the water production, calibration, instrumentation, and we do some package plants as well. Basically, we're a design, build and operate contractor. Company was set up in 2008. 4 guys came out of another company to set it up. I think in 2008, couldn't have been a worse time. They were sitting in a room on their own for quite a long period of time with not much to do. They won a couple of small jobs with local authorities, a couple of small clients, and lately a lot of our work is Irish Water. Some of the major projects that we have completed in the last 6 years. Millipore Pharmaceutical, Forest Common was for Irish Water, Burncurtain and Feather was a water supply scheme in Tipperary, Cavan Wastewater Upgrade Works, North East Roscommon, again water supply, Kerry Central, and recently we've won a substantial tender in the UK. I suppose it touches on Paul's point about companies exporting their information to the UK. Sorry, no. There you go. Millipore was our kind of first foray into 3D. Basic SketchUp stuff, and purely from a presentational point of view, and this was as far back as 2012, 2013. For us Common was a successful tender that we won, and at tender stage we modelled everything in SketchUp as well, just purely for presentational point of views. Like I say, a successful tender. Cavan Wastewater Upgrade Works again was modelled in SketchUp, but it was the first time that we used any kind of 3D tools for the guys on site. It was extensively used by the contractor, the site management and the site engineers. It was a very complex reinforced concrete structure, multiple different levels, and we actually did a bit of lunch and learn on the site with the contractor, so he was able to pull sections through it himself to kind of double check his levels and stuff he just couldn't see from a 2D plan. Burncurtain and Feather was another large project we won. Limited 3D model on this one because it was such a difficult site. Feathered, the picture on top, Feathered water supply scheme is on the top of Sleeping in Tipperary. Incredibly difficult site to work with. 3 or 4 kilometre road up to the site. Massive digs. North East Roscommon, rural water supply scheme. In 2015, Glan Agua made the decision to kind of move into kind of the Revit and BIM space, and this was the first project that we implemented Revit on. Mark Green is here today. Mark was very good to us software wise. We bought our software with Mark and did all our training with Mark at that stage. No different than some of the other guys this morning. Very steep learning curve because we were producing all the models, both the structural, the MEP, especially the MEP. We had a very, very steep learning curve to get it all working anywhere right. Kerry Central rural water supply scheme. Again, a successful tender that we won in 2015, and this was a huge step up for us as a company from both Revit and BIM kind of point of view. We were the main contractor. We coordinated all the models. In this one here you can see mechanical, structural models. We were taking in files from, say, structural guys, providing us with IFCs, suppliers, Grundfos pumps were supplying us with, step files, all that type of thing. Everything had to be coordinated in the model. Huge amount of work and a huge step up from Revit and especially from a BIM point of view. I suppose that's kind of where Jonathan comes in to talk about his BIM and the BIM implementation for a company. Like I said, this was a massive game changer for us.
Hi, how's it going? So as Mike said, I'm Jonathan Grimes. I'm working with Glan Agua for about the last just over 2 years. I kind of got on board just after we won the Kerry tender. So I'm also the guy who probably talks about BIM a lot, talks about BIM all the time. I've always done a lot of talking. I did a lot of talking when I was in Paul Vessey's classes here at LIT, and I'm still doing it now. I suppose actually on that point, as Paul said, my first introduction to hearing about BIM at all was back in 2008 in one of Paul's classes, watching an animation on Navisworks and kind of thinking, you know, this is great if we can all get into this kind of stuff, you know, it takes the boredom out of some of the day-to-day work. So anything that takes the boredom away from me is something I get into, you know. But so I suppose I got into, after we won the project in Kerry, it was the first project we'd ever won that had a mention of BIM in the tender document. So that was a big difference for us, and we said, okay, well, if it's going to mention BIM, it was a very vague mention, but it was a mention of BIM. And we said, okay, well, how close can we get to doing this in the right way? How can we start to develop a process that we can start to deliver all our projects in BIM, or as many of our projects as possible in BIM? What does BIM mean? And I suppose, how are we going to try and implement BIM? So we started at the start. Actually, that's just a slide to acknowledge that we've just recently been nominated for the BIM Excellence Awards, part of the ICE for Kerry, and we're in with some stiff competition from different areas of the construction sector, but I suppose from our perspective it's great acknowledgement to the amount of work we try to do on Kerry, and we've tried to stick as close as we can to whatever guidelines and standards are out there and implement them in an industry which I suppose is overlooked when BIM is spoken about a lot, the water and wastewater sector. But from our perspective, the idea of BIM is about asset management, and we're predominantly working for utilities companies who are more concerned about asset management than anyone else in the industry, really. You know, this is what they do, and we want to help them do it better, I suppose. So a little overview. For us to implement BIM, we need a buy-in. Buy-in has to be driven from the top down. It has to be, you know. We're fortunate enough, I suppose, as Mike said, we're a fast-growing company. We have directors who are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Everyone's involved in it. You know, so getting direction from the top down wasn't hard from us. Getting buy-in demanded, you know, we had to create awareness. We had to let everyone know that BIM isn't one guy sitting in a room. BIM is everyone, and it's hard to get QSs, as mentioned already. But like, they're probably the slowest. But getting everyone involved and saying BIM affects everyone, you know, that's how we look at it. If we're going to do a BIM job, it can't just be one guy doing BIM. Everyone has different levels of information, even down to some of the graduate engineers we found, they're putting together Excel sheets. Now they're going to be putting together Excel sheets that are being extracted out of BIM models, you know. So we had to define the plan that we wanted to take. We had to develop an understanding, then we had to execute it. Because like it's been mentioned here by Paul already, you know, you can't just continually talk about BIM, you know. At some stage we wanted to just delve in, start making mistakes, start correcting the mistakes, start seeing what works and what doesn't work. I always hated hearing when I first heard about BIM champions, until someone said, okay, you're going to be over BIM implementation, and I went, God, I need to find some BIM champions quick, you know. And so like, yeah, that's what we had to do. So I suppose, as I said already, we had to start creating the building blocks, produce the plan, evaluate the risk. I suppose when I mentioned risk evaluation, a lot of that kind of stuff came from just sitting down around the table and guys throwing stuff out, or hearing stuff at meetings and guys saying, well, is it going to cost more money? What's it going to do? Are we going to achieve any benefits out of it? All this stuff that we took into consideration just to try and mitigate some of it, so we could show people this is how we're mitigating the risk. this is how it's going to be gotten rid of, you know. Define the benefits, because that's also a way to mitigate risk as far as we're concerned. If you can show people that's a benefit, the risk is slightly back, you know. Understanding the standards and guidelines as they apply to us. I think that was a big aspect for our company, because as I said already, you don't often hear it mentioned in the BIM world. You don't hear mention of the water and wastewater sector. It's predominantly talking about office blocks being built by large tech companies and this kind of stuff, you know. But we just feel it's an industry-wide issue, and we wanted to get involved too. So, setting up our common data environment, choosing a common data environment, understanding how to operate in a common data environment, you know, all those kind of issues. We had to delve into it and see how best we could do it. Produce our own BIM documentation. I think that's probably an essential aspect of it. You can't always just go off the PAS 1192 and BS 1192 guidelines. You can't just send someone a generic instruction of how you definitively want them to do something. You know, if you want them to do something in a certain way, you have to try and give them direction exactly how you want them to do it. And I suppose, like, from our perspective, when we're managing the jobs ourselves, we found that's really, really beneficial way of doing things. It's worked for us. We think probably some of the jobs where it's been a bit harder is where we've been subcontractors, and maybe some of the main contractors have their way of doing BIM, but they haven't really told us their way of doing BIM or how they want us to do it. And that comes down to communication and just, I suppose, a lack of understanding. I suppose, like David mentioned, lonely BIM. I think sometimes it's kind of an assumption that I'm doing lonely BIM and he's doing lonely BIM. You don't tell each other, you know, and that's why it stays lonely, you know. But so this is just, I suppose, from our initial conversations when we were all sitting down, we were talking with directors, talking with contracts managers, talking with QSs, everyone around the table, and just trying to get an understanding of how people, what risks they saw about BIM. So my one is the top one, and that was my biggest risk, you know, because people have to understand that if a company are going to implement BIM, like, you can have BIM champions, but you have to have buy-in from everyone. You have to have people who are willing, I suppose, like the last one, that, like the last point says, that are willing to change, maybe look at different ways of doing things, embrace technology and see, you know, is there a better way of doing this, you know. Unrealistic expectations. I think, you know, there was an initial concept in a lot of companies that when you start doing things in Revit, then you're doing BIM, and that's the end of that. And where's all the money going to come from? Where's it all? It should be pouring in now. We're doing Revit. I suppose the more you get into BIM, the more you realise, you know, it's a process and not just a 3D tool. Lack of patience, I suppose, ties into the first one. It's, you know, we started doing Revit, so we should automatically be seeing our ROI, their return on investment, straight away. But, you know, we had to bring these out in the open and say, look, this stuff takes time. You know, we're going to develop, templates are going to change, BIM execution plans are going to change. Like, this is all a work in progress. We're going to have to see what works and what doesn't work. You know, we're going to have to come up with these ways of doing it. And the only way of doing it is by getting stuck in and giving it a try. So, likewise, bringing on our supply chain. And I suppose maybe partially it was down to the size of Kerry and the scope of Kerry, that we didn't have that much of a problem getting most of our suppliers, if not all our suppliers, producing 3D models, working in 3D. Look, maybe they were afraid to not get to work, but nearly every single one of them did it. And where we had to bridge the gap with one or two subcontractors maybe that were working in 2D, we planned it out in a way that gave us enough time to produce their information in 3D and get it approved by them, because I think that's the key. You don't want to be taking all the risk off someone that you're paying to design something and taking it away from them, you know. So we let them know, this is what's going to happen. If you can't produce 3D, we'll do the 3D, but you'll be approving it, you'll be checking it, you'll be doing that, you know. So as I said before, applying the guidelines to our sector, and people who are averse to change, you know, because change has to happen. Just a quick overview of some of the benefits as we saw. Client satisfaction. I suppose the whole aspect of BIM is that you're looking at what a client wants, you're looking at what their organisation wants, you're looking at what the asset information requirements are, and that's what they develop their EIR with, and we're going to respond to it with our BEP. Like, that's what I'd see as being the main aspect of BIM. And obviously, if you can give the client exactly what they want in the format that they want, then you're doing BIM in the right way. I suppose just touching again on our company, and Mike said it there, I suppose our company grew fast and grew quick, and we were fortunate that we picked up a lot of jobs on the way, and we had to build up our workforce quickly, and we had guys coming back from Australia and guys coming from different companies and different backgrounds. They all had their own way of working. So by us adopting BIM, it allowed us to standardise our workflow. We said, look, this is how we all work now. This is the route we're trying to find. So it alleviated some of guys coming from different backgrounds with different ways of working. Our BIM workflow alleviated that. We brought them all in and said, look, we're all going to try and work in this way. So it was hugely efficient in that way. I won't touch on all these because I have a few more slides and I don't want to be pressed too much for time on the lads. So a quick overview, I suppose, of our plan. They're all areas that, high-level areas, of course, that we wanted to look at. Asset definition, as I said already, what our client requirements are in relation to assets. I know people often talk about Kobe and all this kind of stuff. We didn't necessarily go down that route. We didn't feel it applicable to what our client needs. We just said, we felt, how can we start with the information, and as the project progresses, put in the information they need and extract it in a format exactly as they want. So we went down the route of using tools like Dynamo for extraction, coming directly from P&ID exports to Excel, and using Dynamo to feed that into a BIM model and straight out into the asset management system that our client is using. So I just thought it was a useful workflow, and it's what worked for us, and it satisfied the client. BIM definition, what is BIM in our sector? Data structure, as I said already, formats for data exchange, how are we going to exchange data, how are we going to let everyone know what we're doing on this project, get everyone on board. Supply chain management, how do we receive the information from our suppliers, how do we appraise it, and who approves it. That ties into the roles and responsibilities, which ties back into our BIM champions and everything else. We understood when we were looking at our company, we have people, when you go past all the acronyms in BIM, you'll have people in your company who already do this stuff. They might just have a different role. They don't realise they're doing it, but we have the expertise within the company. If you tell them it in the right way and you make them understand what's happening, they'll pretty much understand their role in BIM. That's how we looked at it. Asset data capture, standardised set of assets. So we overlooked at the start, we said, well, we have an operations team, we do a lot of DBO contracts. So we have our own operations team, we have our own way of applying the government soft landings approach, because we can talk to our own guys and say, what information do you need when you're operating a building? What system are you using? Apart from what our client is going to get when we hand over the building, the facility, we had to think about our own operations team. So coming up with a standardised set of assets that's going to be captured throughout the project was useful for us. Naming convention, obviously we wanted to stick as close to the BIM level 2 guidelines as possible, so we applied BS 1192 for our naming convention and for our workflow within the common data environment. And as I said, producing our company BIM documentation, which we continue to review, because it's only when you get to certain stages of a project you realise this doesn't work, we need to change it, or this was probably a bit presumptuous, it's not going to work like this in the future, in reality it's going to work like this. So definitely all our BIM documentation is considered a work in progress. Our delivery route, just a quick overview. When we received our EIR, we produced our BEP, which is a live document which was going to be updated throughout the project, depending on if the client had additional requirements they wanted, or if there was other information that needed to be readdressed. We were going to update our BEP and redistribute our BEP. Setting up our common data environment in line with BS 1192, PAS 1192, all the workflows and standards, assessing our BIM capability assessment of our suppliers and our subcontractors. From that, producing our task information delivery plans and our master information delivery plans. Understanding what a task information delivery plan was to a wastewater and water sector company, what defines task information, and tying that in to create a master information delivery plan that we could go off. So that produced our deliverables, and then we continually produce our reports, analyse what's happened, and try and learn from what has worked and what hasn't worked. That's just a little snip of, we used BIM 360 docs for Kerry as a common data environment. So within that we've BS 1192 defining our workflows and our naming conventions. We set our permissions to set our permissions and our approvals and approval process, and try to just carry that out within BIM 360 docs as close to obviously the BIM level 2 standards as we could. Just a little overview of our, I think it's our first, probably our first response in the BEP there. Our naming protocol for the project for Kerry, and our common data environment protocol, which we would have distributed to everyone involved in the project to just let them know this is how we want you to work in the common data environment, this is how we want you to name files for the project, and everything was obviously outlined in our BIM execution plan. So that's just a little snippet of the workflow which we used. There's probably better ways of doing things out there, but we would have started off in AutoCAD PNID, our Plant 3D section of PNID. The output to Excel. So from that Excel file, we used Dynamo to pull some of the parameters from the Excel file and feed it straight back into, well, it's a Navisworks image there. But I suppose that's how we saw about just creating a process that worked, because we can have an Excel file that doesn't need to be getting worked on by someone in the BIM team who might be working on another project. That can be worked on by a graduate engineer, can be working on a guy who knows exactly what he's doing from electrical side of things and from everything else. So it's tying everyone in together, and it's, like I said already, it's pulling in different roles and responsibilities and saying, this is how your role goes in BIM now, you know. It's not just a separate Excel file that you do, that you send to someone else and no one knows what's going on with it, you know. So it's just part of trying to tie everyone in together and also delivering to the client requirements. I suppose these are just a couple of areas that we continually assess at the end of projects or throughout the project even. How we evaluate the EIR, what are the client's requirements, how are we going to produce, how are we going to respond to this, because we've produced BEPs on projects even where we haven't received an EIR, just because we want to be doing things the right way. I suppose ultimately our goal would be to get BIM level 2 certified as a company, so we want to make sure we're trying to work in the right way all the time. Just make BIM our brand. I suppose it has to be, in a way, when you start getting into BIM. It's like David was saying there, you know, you have to keep going with it. You have to try and do it the best way you possibly can and make it your brand, improve it as you go, make yourself attractive to, you know, not only, I suppose, projects in Ireland, but obviously with the mandate over in the UK, think bigger, you know, and that's what we've started to do. We've won a decent amount of work over in the UK. We've just won a project which is section of the HS2 project over in the UK, which is all being delivered to BIM level 2. The client we're involved with, it's early contractor involvement, and we're actually giving them BIM consultancy as well as everything else. So we're going to tell them exactly what to put in the EIR, and we'll deliver it exactly the way we want. I'm joking, but it's an interesting time, I think, you know, and especially for Irish companies, like we said, we can do it quicker because we're a smaller market. I think there's a lot of work to be picked up over in the UK. So I suppose that's just where we're at the moment. The top is a couple of tenders that we just recently completed, probably about 100 million sterling value, so we're hoping to get close on those, if not all the way. Then you've Kerry, and you've another just pharmaceutical project that we did over in the UK. So all that pipe work, everything was all manufactured, fabricated off-site, and just clicked in place. Simple. I swear to God. But that's where we're at the moment, and that's just a little overview of where we're at. So I'll leave it at that.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Right.